Kia ora and welcome to another fantastic, exciting lesson in economics. You're with Mr. Pietkiewicz or BroSir, and as always, our Mr. Famous Teddy Bear, going for the Nobel Peace Prize and a proud supporter of the Breast Cancer Foundation. Look at that, right there. Okay, so our lesson today is on the exchange rate effect. Now remember, the exchange rate is global, okay? A lot of countries around the world have their own currency. So think of the global perspective. The global perspective. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at understanding what is a depreciation and an appreciation of the exchange rate. And we're also going to understand how changes in the exchange rate affect aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Ready to rock and roll? Yes. All right, let's do it. Okay, the exchange rate. The exchange rate. An exchange rate, okay, it's between two countries and it's the rates at which one currency will be exchanged for another. Okay, it's the rates. One currency exchanged for another. And exchange rates are determined in the foreign exchange market. Beautiful. So let's think of this example between New Zealand and Australia. Okay, so an exchange rate of $1 New Zealand to 78 cents Australian dollar. That means that if you exchange $1 New Zealand dollar on the foreign exchange market, you will receive 78 cents Australian dollars. Okay? And for every $1 Australian, you can exchange that for $1.28 New Zealand dollars. How do we calculate that? Wow. So how do we calculate it? We just go $1 divided by 0.78. Remember, that's the NZD. Okay, that's the New Zealand dollar. And that's the Australian AUD. So it's simply $1 divided by 0.78. Okay. And that can be exchanged for $1.28 New Zealand. Fantastic. Let's rock and roll. Alrighty. So what is a depreciation on the exchange rate? Well, here it is. The depreciation of a country's currency refers to a decrease in the value of that country's currency. So let's use the New Zealand dollar as an example. So if the New Zealand dollar, which is known as the NZD, if that depreciates relative to the Australian dollar, which is known as the AUD, it takes more New Zealand dollars to purchase $1 AUD. Okay, it's going to require more New Zealand dollars. So let's assume that $1 NZD could previously buy $0.80 AUD. Okay, so let's assume that one New Zealand dollar could buy 80 cents Australian dollars. If then this decreases to $1 NZD equals 0.75 AUD, so it's a decrease in 5 cents. Okay, let's just assume that. And so if we do it the other way around, $1 Australian could buy $1.25 New Zealand dollars previously, and now it could buy $1.33 New Zealand. Okay, so the Australians can buy more New Zealand dollars. They receive more on the foreign exchange market. And how we do that maths, once again, $1 divided by 0.75. Okay, $1 divided by 0.75. Fantastic. Okay, so when the New Zealand dollar depreciates relative to the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar becomes more competitive. Okay, it becomes more competitive. This is because the price of New Zealand goods, when exchanged, okay, so when it's exchanged to Australian dollars, will be cheaper for Australian importers. Remember, they are getting more. Look, they can now buy $1.33 New Zealand dollars, whereas before it was only $1.25. So the Australians are getting more New Zealand dollars when they exchange their currency on the foreign exchange market. Now what happens here is that this leads to an increase in New Zealand exports. Okay, because our New Zealand goods and services now appear a lot cheaper in the eyes of the Australian importers. Okay, so it's now cheaper for Australian firms to buy our goods and services. So a depreciation in the exchange rate is going to favour exporters. Remember, if this is confusing or I'm going too fast, just hit the rewind button. Play it again. Play it slowly. Okay, so depreciation in the exchange rate. Depreciation is good for exporters. Okay, overseas importers are going to be importing New Zealand goods and services. So for the New Zealand economy, they will be exporting a lot. Okay, fantastic. That's why there's always a debate between the exporters and the importers. You'll see it on news quite a bit. What is an appreciation in the exchange rate? So an appreciation in the exchange rate. The appreciation of a country's currency, that refers to an increase in the value of that country's currency. If the New Zealand dollar appreciates relative to the Australian dollar, it takes less New Zealand dollars to purchase $1 Australian. Okay, so for every dollar you purchase in Australia, it now takes less New Zealand dollars to purchase it. So let's assume that $1 NZD could previously buy $0.80 AUD. It then increases to $1 NZD equals 0.85 AUD. Now if we do that the other way around, excuse me, 1 AUD could buy $1.25 NZD previously, and now it could buy $1.18 NZD, which is $1 divided by 0.85. Remember our little formula here? Okay. So now we can actually buy more Australian dollars for every 1 New Zealand dollar. But for Australians, okay, they are getting less New Zealand dollars for every dollar they exchange on their foreign exchange market. So it's going to be good for New Zealand importers. Okay, they can now buy more with their currency. So when the New Zealand dollar appreciates relative to the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar becomes less competitive. This is because the price of New Zealand goods when exchanged to Australian dollars will be more expensive for Australian importers. This leads to a decrease in New Zealand exports, okay, because our goods and services, the New Zealand goods and services, are now more expensive for Australian importers. But there's going to be an increase in imports from overseas. Okay, so New Zealand importers are going to be now importing more. They can buy more with their currency. Boom, buy more, importers. Okay, so it is more expensive for Australian firms to buy our goods and services. Remember that. An appreciation in the exchange rate is going to favour New Zealand importers. Okay, they can buy more with the New Zealand currency. It's not going to be good for exporters. Because remember, they get paid in Australian dollars. Okay. So they'll get less, see here, they will get less New Zealand dollar currency when they exchange it on their foreign exchange market. Fantastic. So let's move on. An appreciation in the exchange rate. It's great for importers. Appreciation, great for importers. Boom. Fantastic. Well, so what are the effects on the aggregate demand curve? What are the effects? Remember, this scenario is great for exporters. Depreciation is great for exporters. They will be receiving higher incomes. Okay, so when they get paid in the foreign currency and they convert it into New Zealand dollars on the foreign exchange market, they will receive more New Zealand dollars. Now we know from previous lessons that a factor that influences aggregate demand, AD, is net exports, which is your exports minus your imports. Okay, exports minus your imports. So if our exporters are exporting more and receiving higher incomes, which they will most likely spend in the New Zealand economy, what's going to happen to our AD curve? That is going to, yeah, you're right, it's going to shift to the right. It's going to go outward. So let's show that now. Okay, so it's going to shift outward to AD1, and we're going to do some lines here. Remember, make sure your lines are prettier than mine. Okay, so the effects on the aggregate demand curve for a depreciation in the New Zealand dollar, it's going to shift the curve outward. Exporters are receiving higher incomes. Fantastic. Titty. Good? Sweet. And appreciation. Effects on the aggregate supply curve. Remember, this scenario is great for importers. It is cheaper for them to import raw materials, which effectively lowers the cost of production. So as a firm, I can now import raw materials from overseas at a far cheaper price because my currency is now worth more. I can get more foreign currency with my New Zealand dollar. Alrighty? Cool. And we know that a factor that influences the aggregate supply curve, AS, is cost of production. Okay, so what's going to happen to our aggregate supply curve if the New Zealand dollar appreciates? It's cheaper for firms to import, cheaper for them to produce. That means they are willing and able to supply more. So the aggregate supply curve, AS dash, is going to shift outward. Once again, remember your lines are prettier than mine. Fantastic. I hope that explains it to you. If you are unsure, please Facebook me. People not in my class, I can be found at facebook.com/BroSir. And also please do the online quiz in the video description to get instant feedback on your understanding of not just tax, okay, but of the foreign exchange market. Fantastic. And here's our famous economist quote. John Kenneth Galbraith. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Economics is extremely useful as a form of employment for economists. Isn't that just LOL? That is hilarious. Okay? What a funny guy. And once again, look at this. Another great smile. To Mickey. Well done. So John Kenneth Ken Galbraith. Yeah, he's passed away now, unfortunately. Canadian-American economist. His books on economic topics were bestsellers from the 1950s through to 2000s. Isn't that amazing? And he was rated as arguably the best known economist in the world during his lifetime, and was one of a select few people to be awarded the Medal of Freedom and the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his services to economics. Okay, so one day if you're amazing at economics, which you will be, you can strive to receive those medals. Awesome. Alright, well that concludes our little lesson today. I hope you had a great time. Hope it was some nice effective teaching for you. Don't forget to subscribe, to share the videos with your friends, and have a great week, and we'll see you later on. Peace out. Good.